he said to them, "Is a lamp brought in to be put under the bushel basket or under the bed and not on the lampstand? For there is nothing hidden except to be disclosed, nor is anything secret except to come to light. If anyone has ears to hear, let them hear." In the name of the Father, and of the Holy Spirit. I come to you from Bethlehem, where I live, just a short walk from where Jesus was born. And I go to Manger Square several times a week, not to go to church, but to go to the market. There's a beautiful fruit and vegetable market nearby, and right now we're in plain harvest season with figs and plums and mint, parsley, mangoes, pale purple eggplants. And as I was meditating on this passage, I realized how often Jesus speaks of harvest, which is the language of his people, my neighbors. He speaks of seeds. He speaks the language of the people. And today's gospel is tucked in the middle of all of these passages in Mark about harvest, about seeds. The parable of the sower, of the mustard seed. And then we find these verses which are a bit out of place. Jesus asked, "Do you bring in a lamp to put it under a bowl or a bed? Instead, don't you put it on its stand?" You don't leave the lamp under the bed. You put it up. You certainly don't put it under a bowl where it might go out. We bring things out into the open. But like so much in the Gospels, I think the context in which we experience it can change. I think of the first disciples when they heard it from Jesus early on in his ministry, thinking, "Oh, in time things will be revealed. People will know who Jesus is. The teachings will begin to make sense." They might have felt some kind of consolation. But then I think about the first Christians who, for teaching their faith, could be killed. And when they hear these same words, they bear the weight of responsibility. Now they are the ones being called to bring this to light. Suddenly, it's not so obvious. Taking that lamp from under the bed isn't an easy act anymore. It seems to go against gravity. And we know it's not so easy to come into the light. There are so many reasons not to come into the light. We think about the good reasons. Those of us who have been wounded, suffered from racism or abuse, all of us who have legitimate reasons to be afraid. Now we turn to that image, and it's really difficult. It seems to go against gravity. It's not a small act at all. As you know, this reading comes to us today on September 11th. 22 years later, we still feel the aftershocks of that day, of the lives lost. An estimated 4.5 million people whose lives have been lost from the wars, the lack of medical care, the events that followed. This morning, I received a message from my friend who's Iraqi, who said, "I know you're in America right now, and I know it's September 11th. It must be so hard for you. All that began that day and all that came after that day, I hope that you're doing okay." How do we stand in front of that and not feel helpless? Come into the light? I'd rather not. But Jesus is not speaking about putting a lamp on a stand. Jesus is talking about the dynamic of the kingdom. It's a man named Abdul Latif who helped me to understand what this means. I was in Jordan speaking to Iraqi and Syrian refugees, and I met Abdul Latif. He's from Syria. He was a taxi driver before the war. And it became too dangerous. He and his wife and children moved around for several years before they became refugees. And he lived in a tiny, not even a house, a kind of box of concrete. He'd been there for several years. And he told me that every day was for nothing. He couldn't work. He had fallen into depression. And then one morning, he woke up and he said, "My life is for nothing. I want to do something with my life." And he realized that there was a tiny square about the size of a mattress in front of his house that was large enough for a garden. And he planted the smallest of gardens. Turns out in Syria, his wife had had a huge orchard, and he used to go sit in the orchard. He said, "I love the color green." And somehow he captured some semblance of that in this small space. I asked him, "What do you want from the future?" And he said, "I don't know anything about the future. All I know is that I want to plant tomatoes." Well, a few months later, someone I know went to visit him, and he was standing among his tomato plants. And he was offering them to others as gifts. We know that each of those tomatoes means everything in the kingdom. To those who have, more will be given. We can only understand this abundance in light of the Gospels, where the widow's coin is worth more than all of the other money, where the mustard seed is the greatest of the seeds. Abdul Latif went to bed feeling he had nothing and realized in the morning he had an entire garden in his heart waiting to be planted. So we planted it and gave it away. That is the kingdom. Coming into the light isn't about big events. It is as big as putting a lamp on a stand, planting seeds, offering a tomato, knowing that it matters in the kingdom. And now we understand this lamp among images of harvest. God plants the seeds. We participate in the dynamic of light in which it grows and grows. A good friend of mine, Jacques Murad, who is a priest who was kidnapped during the war, talks about these little things so much it drives me crazy. So one day I finally said, "Okay, Jacques, there's billions of people in the world. What does God care about my salad?" And he said, and I quote, "My salad. There's no such thing as my salad. There's no such thing as my kingdom. But the salad you prepare for others, that is the kingdom for today. The prayer we do for others, that is the kingdom for today. Helping somebody at the door, that is the kingdom of today." He insisted in the nowness of the kingdom. Everything will be revealed now, not just in the future. And we've all felt it. We've all felt it. When you plant a seed, when you notice the color of strawberries, when somebody opens the door for you, that is the kingdom for today. Pay attention, Jesus says. Pay attention to what you hear. Jesus is asking us to pay attention to God's prompting. When we respond to hate with love, that is the kingdom. When we speak in the face of injustice, that is the kingdom. When we advocate for the poor, that is the kingdom. When we give away what is ours instead of holding on to it, that is the kingdom. That is acting against gravity. That is participating in God's dynamic. And when it feels impossible, we just wait. It's not us bringing light into the darkness. It's God who calls us forward, God who plants the seeds, God who is light. And we're simply joining our light to God's light until we become a community of light. A tomato, a seed, a lamp on a table. Where will we find the kingdom today?